Now, before I go on and start trimming, I'm going to do something that you should get in the habit of doing all the time. I'm going to save the project. It's always a good idea all the time just to click on this little button and save it, or Control and S. Only takes a couple of seconds and it'll help you out. If things go wrong, your machine crashes horribly, then it'll save everything up to that point. There's automatic backups going on, but it's a good idea just to regularly save it yourself anyway. Now, I want to get on here and want to start trimming this stuff. So let's have a look at this.
David, I want to... David.
Well, there we are. You can see that's wrong in the first place. I mean, for a start, this bit is on 2 speakers. This bit is only on 1 speaker, but I'll sort out the sound later on. But I do have 2 Davids.
David.
So I want to try and trim off one of those. It'd be quite nice actually if I could see the waveform, if I could actually see the sound visually as well as hearing it. Well, you can. Looking down here, you can see I've got a yellow thing, which is the video clip, and I've got a green thing, which is the sound, and I've got this at the bottom, which is effectively the transparency of the clip. I want to look at the green bit in more depth. Now to do that, I'm going to come over to the track header and click on this little triangle. And that'll pop open the green section. And I'll just make these windows a little bit bigger here so we can see it a bit more. So I'm just grabbing hold of the join between the timeline here and the source window or the player window. And I'm making this window a bit smaller whilst making this one a bit bigger so we can see it a bit better. And you can see here, well, for a start, this one ended up with 3 green audio tracks. This has just got the 1. It's obviously something going on there. And you can also see the waveform, which is what we call this display here, which shows you the sound as a picture. You can see for a start that this one is all over one side. There's nothing on that side, whereas this one has got a bit on both sides. Also, if we zoom in a little bit, so I'm just going to use this little slider up here to zoom in a section, and then play it.
David.
You can see that's a David, and that's a David. I basically need to get rid of all of that. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's very simple. Come over to the clip, grab hold of the end, and drag it. Now, as I go to the join of the clips, you can see that little orange set of brackets popping up. And as I move from one side to the other, it goes from 1 bracket to 2 brackets to 1 bracket. When I'm over here, and it's 1 bracket, that means click down right now and you'll start trimming this clip. If I come over here, and the bracket is pointing the other way, and I click down, I'll end up trimming this clip. If I go in the middle and click, I'll do both. I'll get this one getting bigger and that one getting smaller, or this one getting bigger and that one getting smaller. So look very carefully as you drag over these things at what little orange bracket is popping up. And then you'll know as soon as you click what you'll actually be trimming. In this case, I want to make this one smaller, this one shorter. So I'm just going to click where I can see 1 orange bracket, and then I'm going to grab hold of the start of that clip and I'm going to drag it. And I'm dragging it all the way over to here. Now, I didn't have to stick this cursor. This thing is called the playhead. I didn't even have to stick that there at all. In fact, if I undo that, move this thing out of the way completely, I'm going to come down here, see the little orange bracket pointing towards the Ringo clip, click, drag, and I'm going to chop off the words David. I've left a bit of a gap, so if I put the playhead back at the start and press the play button,
David. I wanted to ask you
you
about...
can see what that gap does. It leaves a gap. It leaves a bit of black, so I need to get rid of that gap. Now, one of the ways I can get rid of that gap is I can right-click and say delete gap. So I've just right-clicked on the gap. It gives me stuff I can do with the gap, and one of them is obviously delete it. There we are. I've now done a little edit there.
David. I wanted to ask you about AVC.
So I've got rid of that extra David. I still think this needs a little bit of tweaking.
David. I wanted to ask you about AVC.
For a start, the sound varies widely between the two, and there's something not quite right. But I'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to go to the next join and have a look at that. So let's just play it.
Easy is it to edit?
Well, it's pretty easy to edit the stuff these.
That's not bad. Maybe I could get rid of my sharp intake of breath. Never like those. So I'm going to chop that off. And I could do exactly the same thing as I did before. Click, drag, delete gap. Or, if I undo that, this is a very, very good time to start using that insert mode that I mentioned earlier on. I mean, I said you should stay in overwrite mode most of the time and go into insert mode when you want to. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use insert mode because it's very, very useful. One of the occasions it's very useful is right now. If I click on that and I go into insert mode, and then I'm going to come down here, click and drag just like before, you'll notice what's happening there is as I'm dragging, it's not leaving a gap, it's closing the gap automatically. So insert mode is a very useful mode to use, and I do use it a lot. I just like to actively choose it as opposed to being in it all the time. So now let's play that.
Easy is it to edit?
Well, it's pretty easy to edit the stuff these days.
Yep, that's not bad. Let's move along to the next join.
Edit it.
And Sony and Panasonic
And
cameras?
Ringo, well, actually, he's far too long he's spending there getting ready to go. In fact, I have too much of me at the end and too much of Ringo at the start. So again, I could do exactly the same thing here. Insert mode, click on this one, drag it, click on that one, drag it. But there are other ways of achieving exactly the same thing. So I'll show you very quickly one of those. Let's undo those two. I want to chop out everything between there and there. So first of all, I'm going to mark out the area. I'm going to stick this thing called the playhead here, and I'm going to mark an in point. Just like I marked an in point in the source, I could put an in point on the timeline. I'm going to move along a bit more, and I'm going to mark an out point there. And I've isolated that section of the timeline. I'm saying, right, I want to dump this part of the timeline. Now to do that, I'm going to do what's called ripple deleting. I can get to that by a right click. Got to right click in the right place. With Edius, you'll find if you right click in one place, it gives you something. You right click somewhere else, it gives you something else. In this case, I can either right click here or right click there. You're going to say, how am I going to know where to right click? Think about it. I'm doing something to do with the entire timeline in the edit, so it's probably something to do with right clicking on the ruler bar, where I marked the in and out points. You know, they're marked up here. It must be something to do with that. So right click up there. Oh, look, there it is. Ripple delete between in and out. Now that achieves the same thing as grabbing hold of the ends and trimming. You use whichever one you feel like. Come along to here.
Is there a big difference
Go to the next join.
in the footage?
Again, when we first...
I'd like to again chop it out between the two. Now I could again do in, out, ripple delete. I could use a different keyboard shortcut. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut to quickly chop the end of that one. And then another keyboard shortcut to chop the start of that one. So I'm taking the playhead, sticking it where I want Ringo to finish, and I'm going to press the M key. And that chops off the end of Ringo. Move it along to where I want me to start and press the N key.
Between the footage?
Again, when we first started, there was...
There we are. I've done exactly the same thing. I've chopped this one off and I've started that one. That's already 3 different ways of achieving what it basically is exactly the same thing. Now I'm going to come through and just trim the rest of the edit up. So let's have a quick look at this one.
Take the stuff.
Wonderful.
Oh boy, there's such a long pause there. Let's go to do the same thing. I'm going to chop the end of that one off. So come over here, grab the end, drag it. Come over here, grab the start, drag it. Watch it.
Take the stuff.
Wonderful. And what is the best program to edit AVC HD on?
Then this one here, again, need to trim the ends off because there's far too much of a gap. It's really too boring. So just come in here, grab, drag, play.
HD on.
Well, my personal favourite is...
To edit AVC HD on.
Well, my personal favourite is Grass Valley Edius.
You might listen to that and say,
AVC HD on.
Well, my personal favourite...
I'm coming in a bit too fast there, you might say.
Well, my...
Maybe I need a little more of a pause in between me and Ringo, so let's add a bit more of a pause back in. Up to now I've been grabbing hold of the end of this and dragging one way and chopping stuff off, but if I drag the other way it adds stuff back in again. So grabbing the start of this clip and dragging this away is adding more stuff at the start.
To edit AVC HD on.
Well, my personal favourite is Grass Valley...
I think I like that a bit better. And then come along and at the end,
Footage.
Oh,
TV footage.
and yep, I need to just grab hold of me and trim me off a bit.
Footage.
Thank you very much, David.
And I think actually I finished Ringo a little bit too early there. I think his words get cut off if you listen to that.
Thank you very much, David.
So I'm going to go and grab the whole end of Ringo and drag him out.
Thank you very much, David.
And then I should actually reply to that. Why didn't I put my reply in? I must have forgotten to put my reply in. Oh, that's no good. I'll have to go and put my reply in. So, File, Recent Clip, Me, go towards the end.
You're welcome.
That's what I should have said at the end. In point with an I,
You're welcome.
out point with an O, drag it, put it down there. Play it.
Thank you very much, David.
You're welcome.
Oops, I've got far too much of Ringo in there. That very quiet Ringo saying thank you very much, David, is there. So I need to trim that off a bit more. So click on it, drag it.
David.
You're welcome.
Much, David.
You're welcome.
Yep, and I've got an edit there. Now there's loads and loads and loads of different ways of going through and trimming and editing inside of Edius. I've shown you a few there of grabbing the ends and dragging. There's also the N and the M keys. There's variations of the N and the M keys. There's even a full-blown trimming window. Now if I go into trimming mode, you'll see that that's what the player window normally looks like. In trimming mode, it suddenly looks like that, with lots of different icons. You might even find that you accidentally get into that at some points, because you can get into that by just double-clicking somewhere on the timeline, like double-clicking on a join. It'll put you into the trimming window. Trimming window is very useful, but you've got to get the hang of it. And for the purposes of this quick edit, I'm not going to go through it. Right, for now, if you ever see the window looking like that, the quickest thing is just get out of that. Get back to normal mode. And you can get back to normal mode by basically coming up to mode here and pressing normal mode. Or F5 if you can remember it. And get back to normal mode. But yeah, there's loads and loads of ways of editing. There's an awful lot of editing and shortcuts and loads of ways of trimming stuff inside of Edius. It's a brilliant program for cutting. We'll go through all of that in the editing section. Right now, I just want to get on and complete this edit. So far, I've gone through and trimmed the joins. Still not happy with a couple of them, particularly this one at the end. Look at that.
You're welcome.
Just as I get to the end there of this edit, I like the way it sounds. I like the pause in between Ringo saying, thank you very much, David, and me saying, you're welcome, in that very sincere way. But the fact is, Ringo looks at the blooming camera. But I can't trim off that bit of video there because I'll make the pause a bit smaller. What would be nice is if the picture from me came in a bit earlier, even though the sound stays as it is, it'd be nice if the me picture comes in a bit earlier. So how do I achieve that? Now you'll notice that whenever I come down here and grab hold of these little clips here, when I click on the yellow section, which is the picture, it selects both the picture and the sound. If I start dragging at this point, it's making both the picture and the sound bigger. What I want to do is come down here and grab on the picture and change that, but don't change the sound. So how do I achieve that? Because every time I click on it, it always selects both. Frankly, most of the time you want it to select both. Most of the time you're going to want to trim the sound and the picture. But what happens if you don't want to? There's a couple of ways of doing it. One is to use a keyboard shortcut, which is what I do. The other is you can come over here and click on this little button, which is on the mode bar. Now click on that and it ignores the grouping. So if I come over here and click, you notice now it's just selecting the picture and not selecting the sound. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make this clip a bit shorter. So come in here and click on that and start dragging. You might notice actually, hang on, I can't drag. It's not letting me drag. Why is that? It's because at the moment I'm in insert mode. In insert mode, if I make that shorter, I'm telling the computer that it's got to move everything else around. The trouble is that if I make that shorter, it can't move everything else around because this is in the way. So as I'm dragging here, it's not letting me do it. Now I've got two possible solutions to that. One, get out of insert mode, go back to overwrite, then you can do what you feel like. Now in this case, I'm dragging Ringo here. Now you might notice I'm really trying very hard to drag it very, very subtly, and it's either snapping to this join or snapping to the playhead because it happens to be there. Again, it's a very useful thing inside of Edius that it will snap to the joins all the time. In this case, blooming irritating because I don't want it to snap. I want to do it a lot more subtly. So I'm going to turn snapping off. Now the way to turn snapping off is you come over to here to this, which looks like a little magnet, and click on it, and you're no longer snapping. Now it's vaguely possible that will not be on your mode bar. You can always add it, have a look at the customizing section for how to add buttons. When I've done that, I can quite happily drag this and be as subtle or as not subtle as I like. Now you'll notice as I'm dragging that, I can see the new end frame up there in the player window. So that's Ringo looking at the camera. Don't want that. Let's go back before he looks at the camera. About there. Now I want to grab hold of me and drag me over. So I'm going to do that. Grab hold of me and drag me across. So now what I've got is the picture starts at a different time to the sound. Let's have a quick look at it. Make sure we're happy with it.
Thank you very much, David.
You're welcome.
Yeah, quite like that. That's nice. So there we are. I've done what's called, in this case, an L cut. Because it looks a little bit like an L there. That's what they call an L cut. You do that an awful lot when you're editing. It's very good to have the picture and the sound start at different times. Now the other area where I need to do that is right back at the start. If you remember, Ringo sits down.
I wanted to ask you about AVC HD.
And for a start, the sound is wildly different between the two. When he says David there, it's completely different to David here. And I'd quite like to use this David as opposed to that one. Now, I could, in that case, trim this one. Let's just turn the grouping back on, because I want to trim both the sound and the video. I could drag this across and bring in the David from here and replace the picture as well. Why don't we do that? Again, I could come over here, click on one and start dragging, click on the other and drag it across. Or this is a good case where I could use the trimming of both at once. Put your cursor at the join, you'll notice you've got the little orange brackets, and click on it when you can see both of them. Because what I want to do is I want to make this one smaller and this one bigger. Then grab hold of that and drag until I've got the whole of the David from the close-up shot in. Yeah, hey, that's good. Let's play that.
David.
Yeah, that works. I've now got all the sound of the close-up microphone, which is a lot better than the distant microphone here. On the other hand, the picture doesn't look quite right because you see Ringo is still sitting down when we get to the end of that shot, but in this shot, he's completely sat down. Okay, that was stupid of us. We should have filmed him sitting down in the close-up, but we didn't. How am I going to get over that? Well, this is another very good case of let this picture carry on, but have this sound. So it's another of those L cuts and J cuts that I just did at the end. So I'm going to make sure the snapping's off, make sure the grouping's off, and come over here and I want to make this one bigger and that one smaller. I'm going to do exactly what I did a second ago, but because this is off, when I click on the join, it just selects the picture, not the sound. So now I'm not going to adjust this, but I am going to adjust the picture. And I'm going to drag it till I think it looks like Ringo has sat down properly, and that the two pictures of him there and him there vaguely match. Picture cuts at a different point to the sound. That's what they call a J cut, because the sound comes in first. Let's play it and see what we think.
David, I wanted to ask you about AVC.
Yeah, that's okay. Looking very close, if you want to be pedantic, his lips here do not match the words. I could trim it a bit further, but I think I can get away with it.
David, I wanted to ask you about AVC HD. How easy is it to edit?
Well, it's pretty easy to edit.
I can start tweaking the joins here. I think I'm okay. I'm quite happy with that, how it is here. I'm just going to click on the little bar here and it'll show me the entire edit. I'm thinking actually at this point here, I yak on for ages. It would be nice to have a little reaction shot of Ringo. Not necessarily saying something, but just a quick shot of Ringo looking like he's actually paying attention. So I'm going to come back to the bin, find the Ringo shot, and I'm just going to look through it. And oh, there we are. There's an eyebrow acting there. There's a bit of Roger Moore there. I want to use that. I want to put that over the top of my conversation. So I get it roughly right, mark a starting point,
And the right program.
ending point. There we are, I've actually got my
And the right program.
Ringo reaction, and I want to put it in about here,
Up-to-date computer and the right editing program.
about there. So I'm going to go back to the player, grab hold of it, and instead of dropping it down here on the 1VA track, I'm going to pop it up here on the 2V track. So in fact I put that on the track above the one below it. Now let's have a quick look at that.
Computer and the right editing program. You just put it into the...
Yeah, there we are. That's got a nice reaction shot of Ringo. Unfortunately, it's brought the sound in as well, and I don't want the sound that goes with that Ringo shot, so I basically want to get rid of it. Make sure I've got ignore grouping selected. Make sure that's actually crossed out. Select the sound, press delete. There's actually a very nice keyboard shortcut that you can do this with without having to keep coming over here and pressing this button. If I leave that button on, I could achieve exactly the same thing by holding down on Alt and then selecting the sound and then deleting it. Again, that's just knowing a particular keyboard shortcut. So let's play that back now.
Computer and the right editing program. You just put it into the program and edit it.
And Sony and Panasonic cameras?
Yeah,
Is there a
that
big
worked.
difference?
That's got a nice little reaction shot. The way these tracks work is basically 2V is in top of 1VA. That means 2V blots out 1VA. You might use it for doing titles possibly which go on top of video. Although Edius does have its own specific title tracks for it, you could stick them on the video tracks. Or you might use it for an insert edit like I've done here, or you might also use it for things like picture-in-picture effects or chroma key effects. You stick one clip on top of another and add an effect to it. We'll talk about that in the effects section.